Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me check my mic. Like I said, guys, I'm going to try to do a show between 5 and 6, Monday through Friday. So be on the lookout for me on those days. And knowing me, my wife said I don't do limitations well. So it's probably not going to stop at the Monday through Friday. It's funny, when I was talking to Hagler Siegler, she was like, you know, how do you get up, do this? How do you do the research for it and all this other stuff? If something digs into you, you enjoy it. I've been at jobs where I hated it, like from the day that you got in to the time that you left. I hated it. I spend probably more time between either research, either looking through articles, looking through stories that I find interesting, and what I find is I think it's you have to almost like make time for you purely for the research part. Like there's a certain amount that you build up in you. It's almost like a bank account, and in building up that amount for that bank account, there's a certain amount that comes out of you just from the stuff that you've built up. But at a certain point, you got to build up new stuff. So you're always like looking at news stories, looking at news articles, and your head you're reading all day. You're like from all day, you're reading all day. And yeah, you have a certain point of view of the world, but that point of view could be altered or tweaked or anything else depending upon what's going on. But I enjoy it, and because I enjoy it, it's a little bit easier to do. It's like, yes, it's work, but it's not work. It's not work, if that makes sense. Yes, you spend more time. Yes, you put more energy into it. Yes, you're doing this from morning, noon to night. But yeah, when you enjoy it, just, you know, is what it is. So guys, I want to thank all my patrons. I want to thank all the people who donate super chats. You guys are awesome. I absolutely appreciate your help on this. And even if you're not donating anything, even if you're sharing my videos, even if you're liking my videos, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I was going to do this video with this guy who's in the military, who's having a conversation about why they attacked those Syrians in Syria. And he has this Orwellian answer that's mind-blowing. He says, well, based on the rules of engagement, we responded to an attack on us. We were returning fire. We were protecting ourselves. And it's like, but you're in a foreign country. You're in a foreign country. Like, you can't break into my house, I hit you, and you shoot me in the face. And then say you were defending yourself. That's massively Orwellian. And the American public looks at this and is okay with this. And the press looks at this and is okay with this. Nobody, no honest person stands up and says, wait a minute, we're in that country illegally. Why are we over there? Why are we over there? That's not the border of North Carolina. ISIS is for the most part down. Why are we over there? We are inching us closer to war. That's what a sane human being would say when dealing with what these people are pushing as their narrative of this, of America is justified in going to any country it wants to. And even if that pushes us closer to the brink of war, we would say it wasn't our fault. Yes, we're in your country illegally. Yes, this is pushing us closer to war, but we were defending ourselves in your country while being in here illegally. And so, yes, we claim the right to shoot you in the face at any moment. It's amazing. It's fucking amazing. That was that was going to be the story that I did. I'm not doing that story. Someone else made me aware of something that piqued my interest dramatically. Let me see. Let me get the gentleman's name. My wife often says, it's like, hey, if somebody sent you a story, give the name of the person who sent the story. It shows that you cared about what the person sent. And she's right. There's certain behaviors I want to encourage, and this is one of them, because I can't find everything. Now, this gentleman's name is, come on. Here we are. The Solo Activist. The Solo Activist. Thank you for the story. I have words to say about this. And the words are going to sound critical, but they're not meant to be critical. They're meant as a stand the fuck up. Where's your backbone? One of those type of conversations. This is addressing the troops. Call it that, addressing the troops. Yeah, I'll go with that. So let's take a look at this. AFL-CIO plans day of action for major Supreme Court labor case. Now, I'm going to read it, and we're going to talk about it after I read it. I checked this with the AFL-CIO itself, and yeah, they are. Multiple sites are quoting this, saying that these guys are planning a day of action. So this one is Working People's Day of Action, New York, 2/24/18. And I'll put both of these at the bottom so you can see it if you want to participate. The AFL-CIO Federation is planning a day of action just before the Supreme Court hears a major case that could damage the power of public sector unions. AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka announced a Working People's Day of Action for February 24th, the Saturday before the Supreme Court hears Janus versus American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Workers, which he called a case against working people. They ratcheted up their fight to break us up because they know we are the strongest together, he said in an email to supporters, promising local events coast to coast. Now is the time for working people to band together, hold the line for our freedom, and join together to make improvements at work and demand an economy that works for everyone. And vote Hillary. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that last part. I'm being an asshole. The Supreme Court will hear the case February 26. It involves whether public sector workers can be forced to join or otherwise financially support their workplace unions as a condition of their employment. Now, Mark Janus, an Illinois state government worker, argues that such requirements, dubbed security clauses by unions, violate his First Amendment rights. Security fees are common provision in public sector unions' contracts and were declared legal by the Supreme Court in 1997 case called Abode versus Detroit Board of Education. The Janus case could overturn that precedent, count on the fees, and likely would suffer financially without them. An internal survey of the union did in 2015 found that only 1/3 of the members would voluntarily pay dues no matter what, and half of its members couldn't be counted on to do that. 15% would be certain to opt out of paying dues entirely. Essentially, breaks the unions. Labor leaders argue that unions are owed the fees compensate for the collective bargaining on behalf of the workers. Dee Taylor, president of the Service Worker Unions Unite Here, told Washington Examiner that if the workers don't want to pay the fees, they can now not work there. They know that they're getting in what they're getting into. When did they become a nation of freeloaders? So, a few points. I think unions are vital and important. Like, I think they're magnificently important. When many of the protections that you have right now, today, that you afford, come from unions. They come from unions. Now, yes, there may be corruption in some of these cases. Yes, when you get up higher up, there's a detachment from the union heads versus the workers themselves. Yes, that's true. That's true. But all in all, when you stack it up, unions have been a vital force for workers in this nation. Vital force. They should be protected. Now, here's the catch. Here's the catch. If the people who are in your union don't believe that your union is worth it for them, and vital for them, should you be forced, or should those people be forced to support the union that they don't believe is vital for them, or that they don't believe is working in their behalf? Now, this question, I think, to some degree, goes to the union itself. Don't you want people to understand the value of what you are? Meaning, whether or not they're being forced and compelled to pay for it. I think anytime you force and compel somebody to pay for something, it pushes them the wrong way. But beyond that, those people need to be made aware that you are working in their behalf. And I think if they don't think that, the question becomes not to force them, but to understand why they don't know it. No, they don't believe it. Like, if we're in a situation where somebody says, you need to pay this organization cash out of your hard-earned paycheck, you need to pay them cash. Now, if I am not politically astute, if I am not into this thing, hell, I might be a right-winger or libertarian, I may say, fuck that. I don't want to be forced to pay for something on that way. Now, it's another thing, though, if that person sees the value in what they're paying for, meaning they can see tangibly, I am getting better gains because this union is here, is working in my interest. Now, I put that question to some degree on the union. Why don't they know that? Why haven't they been educated to see, or to get across this idea that this union is working in your interest? And for all intents and purposes, not to be brutal, but are you working in their interest? I agree in a general way that unions are important. I agree that unions have been magnificent in getting these things for workers' rights and everything else. What I'm asking here is more fundamental and more goes down to the human element in this. Why don't they know, or why don't they believe that you are working in their interests? And is it a thing of optics where they haven't seen it, they don't necessarily see it materially or tangibly, or it's one of those things of, yes, we're generally working for your best interests? What I'm asking you is something that's more basic. Shouldn't those people understand that? And if they don't understand that, why? If they don't get it, why? I understand the legalities of the lawsuit and everything else. I'm asking this question from an honest perspective in regards to the union itself. And look, I would love to have somebody on from either that union or from one of the other unions to talk about this. I have full-throated support for unions, so don't misunderstand me. But I'm asking this question in the same way I would ask the question of, why did this kid shoot these people in the face? I want to understand what the human element is saying about this, why they don't necessarily get this. And I kind of want to propose that to some degree you're shooting yourselves in the foot. Now, not in this case. I understand the freeloader argument. Those people don't necessarily think they're freeloaders because they don't necessarily see what you're doing for them. This is kind of the point I'm getting at. Those people should know, like flesh to bone. They should understand this is what the union is doing for me. This is what the union is doing for the entire country. You've somewhat shot yourself in the foot, however. Put that to the side for the moment. Union members have assiduously tied themselves to parties, meaning in other countries, and also in the United States. In this particular case, they tied themselves to the Democratic Party. When all the other parties fell about, socialists, unionists, all those guys fell apart, they tied themselves to Democrats. Now, at some point, I would imagine that this was co-equal partners, man and woman, or man and man, both bearing their hairy chests and say, yes, we're helping each other to achieve our aims. But at some point, it wasn't man and man. It was, crack-addicted, alcoholic, an enabler. Now, this enabler has taken the place or taken the form in many cases. I would say blacks, I would say Hispanics, and yes, unions. Unions. At some point along the way, maybe when they took their first drink, maybe when they took their first shot of heroin, whatever you want to call it, at some point along the way, the co-equal partners in this, meaning you being close to Democrats and we're both men bearing our chests. Well, at some point, it wasn't that way. Something fundamentally changed. Ultimately, you became so terrified that you could not leave this guy, this brute, this alcoholic. And at some point, he starts to punch you and hit you. At some other point, he starts to humiliate you. He has sex with your girlfriend and all this other stuff. And at the end of the day, you bitched, you moaned, you complained. But you always came back. One election cycle after the next, you always came back. And what they realized was, if this political situation is bad, these guys have nowhere else to go. So I can do whatever I want. They can bitch, they can moan, they can do all they want. But at the end of the day, they were going to be here. And they're going to be on that fighting line, fighting in my interests, regardless of what I do, regardless of what I say, regardless of what I represent, and regardless of how I let them down time after time again. Part of the problem here is you being willing to go along with the things that party does. Meaning your weakness. When you look at, explain to me, do you believe that you've been served by affiliating yourself with the Democratic Party? First question. And second question is, if there was another party that represented your interests, would you go along with that party? Because clearly Democrats have two interests. One, suckering progressive and lefties. And two, taking massive amounts of cash and doing what those guys say. Now, I asked the question of if there is another party to represent your interests, would you do it? Because I'm trying to make this point to you that you're not here because you like what they're selling. You're here because you're terrified of the monster at the door, the Republican Party. Now, I'm saying because of that, the relationship has changed from co-equal partners, where it's Bob and Bob or Bob and Todd, to it's Bob and it's the enabler that can't go anywhere else because he doesn't believe that he can go out into the world and find somebody else to love him. Why do you have that black eye? I fell down the steps. How did you break your arm? I walked into a door. I walked into a door. You didn't walk into a door, dude. You didn't walk into a door. Be honest. You can talk to me. You didn't walk into a door. Ultimately, you hitched your star to a wagon, and at some point, you realize, I'm sure you've realized, they looked at me and told me I have nowhere else to go. So the things that I needed as unions to try to allow us to prosper, even when there's the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we helped get these people in office. We marched, we stomped, we pushed for these people. No employee free choice. No employee free choice. You did protect Wall Street, though, but you did not get the employee free choice. I'm trying to make the point to you that apathy is not necessarily the best thing in the world. And I understand that Republicans are batshit crazy, but you cannot get anything done with the idea of having some kind of arm or assistance with the Democratic Party itself, because they understand that you have no leverage in the situation. They will always look at you and tell you, you have nowhere else to go. You will fall in line and you will get your people out there to march on our behalf. This Workers' People's Day, that's fine, but I guess my point is, you've associated yourself with a party for so long that you've been getting decimated in this kind of game of attrition where they've been taking more and more and more from you. When they're passing NAFTA and Obama's out there trying to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that is a direct attack on labor. Yes, what the Supreme Court is going to do is going to hurt. But you must understand, I'm making the point to you that even your party, the party that you've affiliated with and stumped with for all this time, for the most part, have left you to your own devices to wither on the vine. When do you get sick of withering on the vine? That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking you to stand in a collective action of no, saying that you're done with that particular party and allow yourself to have new opportunities for other groups that will actually represent your interests, not give voice to your interests, and then shaft you later on. That's what I'm asking. I'm calling a rally of the troops. I understand that Republicans are insane. This is the worst case scenario for unions. But understand, you have not prospered. You have not prospered. To note, you have not prospered. If you're going to work this hard for a particular party and political interests, don't you want to get something out of that? Not just lip service, but something out of it. Somebody who would actually represent your particular interests. My argument here is that you're staying with him because you're terrified of the other guy, not because you love this particular guy. And if there was anything here that represented your interests to 1 iota more, you would jump ship in a heartbeat. You're terrified. This collective action is nice. The collective action that you need is a fundamental thing of saying we're done with Democrats. Full stop. Solidarity of no. That's what you need. That's the position that you need to take. If they're going to win, let them win without you. If they're not going to represent your interests, what's the point? And until you actually pull that chain, until you actually realize that you yourself also have value in that relationship, yes, you're terrified. But you're terrified or you being scared, cowardice, is not a reason for capitulation. So I understand this thing of trying to create a large stage and a large noise at what the Supreme Court is about to do. I'm making the point to you that your method of events and the ways that you have gone about these affairs have not led to positive outcomes. That's all I'm saying. At some point, you need to be able to change. That change needs to start with being willing and able to say no. If Democrats are not going to represent your interests, tell them to fuck off. Tell them to fuck off. And make a decision to do something on your own. Aggregate with the other parties. These other workers' parties. These, yes, they may be small. Something like the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, Green Party. These things, when Nick Brana is trying to pull these guys together to come under this kind of one umbrella, maybe you should think about that. Maybe you should realize that they are actually trying to represent your interests. And the muscle that you've been giving to Democrats year after year after year is that it's been getting cut short more and more and more based on the policies that the people who you are pushing for, you're being complicit in your own destruction. I'm saying jump ship. I'm saying do something else. I'm saying People's Party is not a bad idea. I'd align your forces with Greens and Independents and all these other groups, socialists. If you want to save Democrats, you need to leave them. If you want to save yourself, you need to leave them and do something else. There was something else I wanted to say about this. Oh, one last thing. This is an imperfect solution. Meaning labor unions. Labor unions are extraordinarily powerful, but it is an imperfect solution. You're always going to have this conflict between boss versus labor. The boss is going to do whatever he needs to do to cut the knees out of labor because labor costs him more money, meaning labor unions cost him more money. They're getting employees higher wages. Because they get employees higher wages, you can imagine that the plutocrats don't particularly like them. Right off the bat, you can see the problem with the Democratic Party and the way it's arranged. You have plutocrats and labor in the exact same party. And in this case, the plutocrats give them a ton of money. They need that ton of money to run. Meaning they lean towards the people who are giving them the ton of money, which is the plutocrats, not labor. What they would give to labor is talking points. They would say nice things to you. But at the end of the day, regardless of what they say to you, they would say, you have nowhere else to go. Go make me a ham sandwich. And assiduously, for the past 30, 40 years, in this emasculated fashion, you've chosen to get that ham sandwich. So stop making the ham sandwich. That junkie, alcoholic that you've associated yourself with dies from a seizure on the couch, or he gets his shit together. In either case, what you want, what you need as an organization, you guys need to take that power into your own hands. If they're going to test you and they lose, then they test you and they lose. What I will say to you is that you need to look beyond going back into the future. Stop looking for the things that you've always done, if those things have not necessarily worked for you. I understand those things worked for you in the past, but I would say up your game. Now, in the people who you're going to support, providing that those people are not Democrats, if you jump ship, if you make the decision, okay, we're going to put this muscle and our weight behind something else, that would be a jarring thing in and of itself. This idea that labor has left the Democratic Party and it would throw them into some degree of a crisis. The crisis here is, what is the least they're willing to accept to fall back in line? It's one thing for you to bitch and moan. It's another thing to be able to say no. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you always come back, they don't necessarily care. There's no power in complicity. That's my point. Look, an upgrade from labor unions is worker co-ops. Labor unions are perfectly fine and they're strong, but they always contain a flaw or a problem. This conflict that's built into the system or built into this particular arrangement between the boss versus the worker. The worker co-op eliminates this idea of the boss, meaning it eviscerates the idea of the plutocrat in this particular process. Ultimately, the workers themselves run the business. There's nothing wrong with labor unions. Don't misunderstand me. I'm saying going back to the 40s and the 50s, however, is not necessarily the way to go, particularly if you ask yourself, why do you have a New Deal? Every gain that you've ever gotten, the plutocrat has been reaching with snarled hands, trying to claw it back. And even if it's taken 50 years to claw them back, they have clawed them back. The New Deal has been destroyed. Welfare has been destroyed. They're going after labor unions wholesale because labor unions don't necessarily have another party to back them up. This is your world. This is your world. So I'm going to put both of these at the bottom so people can get into it if they want to go. Guys, Jamal is ripping on 2 organizations forming a new political party. I'm not ripping on them. I think it's a good thing. What are you talking about? No, what are you talking about? I'm making this point that they need a third party. They need to be willing to go to a third party. That's my point. Don't misunderstand my point. I'm not going to do this one for too long because I had like a 3-hour show earlier in the morning. But if there's somebody from the labor unions that want to call in, feel free. Oh, guys, the call-in thing is for patrons. My wife, and not just my wife. People are like, I need to call in. I need to call in. I try to create a division in the sense of saying if somebody is a patron, they call in. But that being said, I still read the comments from people who are here who are not necessarily patrons. So if there's somebody from the labor union who wants to have a conversation about this, feel free. I am not ripping the organizations, by the way. I'm just making the point that they need to change. Something needs to be different. Because what they're doing is slowly destroying them. And I don't think that can be contested. Yeah, don't think that can be contested. So let's see. The Gundams are the 1%. We need a mobile suit party. Martin, the union leadership has been in the same place since before Hoffa, selling out the workers for personal gain and political power. Lorms, right there. That's my point. Like, when these people are saying vote Hillary, that's not the workers. That's not the workers. Those groups that didn't go for Bernie Sanders was the obvious choice if you're talking about labor. So if those groups didn't go for Sanders and they broke for Clinton, you have to ask why. It wasn't because labor wanted it. Was it because of the bosses? And yeah, if you're seeing a division between bosses and labor, understand the bosses, these guys talking about a new party. They're not talking about a new party because they're just randomly talking about a new party. Many of their workers went for Donald Trump. Imagine what happens to the union if you have all of these Trump supporters who don't see the value in unions, who believe that these guys are trying to get them to vote for Hillary Clinton, somebody who they don't necessarily believe in. And then you have a bill or a Supreme Court ruling that says, look, if you don't want to pay for a union, you don't have to pay for it. You've allowed the Democratic Party to destroy what you are. This is, understand what I'm saying. You're not interrogating the reasons of your failures and the reasons that these people don't necessarily want to be associated with you. It is very possible that your affiliation with the Democratic Party is in part of that. If they're looking at that party and they're finding that party to be corrupt, that not in the interest of labor, these guys are selling my jobs out overseas, I don't trust that particular person, that person cheated, Bernie Sanders, whatever they come up with. If you're pushing those people to say you need to vote Hillary Clinton and those people say fuck that, you've just destroyed your union. The moment that that bill passes, those people are not going to see the value in your leadership because they fundamentally disagree with your politics. I'm just saying. Too many bosses are paid off hacks to Jacqueline Thompson, M99. It's because Randy Weinergarten is a bought and paid for whore. Yvonne Legolis. Yeah, look at the UAW. Naturally will give unions a bad name. Unions, if you're listening to this show, this is my point, and I think this is our point. We are supporters of you. We are people who absolutely see your value in this society. But by the same token, how do you support Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders? And if you're being honest, you certainly understand that he was a better choice if you're talking about unions. Meaning, if you're talking about the guy who's out there for workers, that was Sanders. It's not the point that you didn't go for Sanders. It's the point that the person you went for was against your interests. The workers who are clamoring, got the bid for somebody. Are you telling me that they were better served? Meaning, you as a union representative is really serving your union by pushing that union to vote for Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. What do you think these guys are thinking when they're looking at this, and they're like, this fucking union, these guys are voting for Sanders. I don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. My union is telling me I should vote for Hillary Clinton. Fuck that. I don't want to do that. You've broken your union. You didn't go for the natural choice. You've broken your union. It's almost as if all of these people here who really support unions, they feel that there's something fundamentally wrong with the leadership of that union in the way that that union leans. This is not people who dislike you. This is not people who don't see your value. These are people who are somewhat critical of you and in regards to your political choices or your political things or decisions. I guess I'm just making the point. If people understood the fundamental value of what you give, even if they had that Supreme Court case, you're not going to lose those people because those people understand the value that you provide to them. If in the last election, you had a lot of people who did not agree with what you were going with, and in this case ends up in a Trump camp and become this kind of tribal Trump member of some degree, you can understand that that breaks your union, that hurts your union. If people believe what you're selling, I guess that's my point. Yvonne M. Lagolis, Solo, yes, I've been hearing this also, but can't find anything on this. Lorms, Jacqueline Thompson, but the workers often have such little to say in the workings of the union. Once powerful union leaders start cranking the get filthy rich machine. I've heard that also, that the people at the top of the unions have, it's like cozy relationships with management as opposed to being antagonistic to management. This is the other reason why the worker co-ops are more natural. You cut out that relationship. It goes away. The workers themselves are running the plants. You, at the same token, are allowed to attack plutocrats in this. You're eliminating them from the process. You're eliminating that division of us and them. There's no them. There's only us. If you're going to support a political party, you should support one that at the very least has that at the core. Meaning, if you're talking about revitalization of unions, fuck that. You're talking about a new paradigm in which you're operating. Talking about a new paradigm. Union wants to talk to you when it's time to pay dues. Otherwise, not so much. M99. Edward Morley. Oh, 100% democracy at work is the best way. Yeah, agreed. Richard. Yeah. Agreed. Richard Wolffe. Love the guy. Many of the worker unions told their employees to fuck off when their endorsement for Clinton. Yeah. Guys, this is not us. If somebody just zoomed into the show, they would be like, these guys are bashing unions. The opposite. The opposite. What we're making at, and the point that we're making to you is, workers want you to represent their interests. They want you to stand up. If that stand up means saying no, then that stand up means saying no. It is not a binary choice. It's being terrified of the other party, and so you just give anything away for Democrats. Has put you as a minority partner that does not get served. It's almost like you're being cuckolded. To have your balls in a clamp. It's like you're not allowed to have an orgasm until election day, buddy. We are holding this key. These are your balls in a jar. You know, I'm trying to make this point that your base wants you to represent their interests aggressively. None of this passive shit. Now I understand that you've gotten weaker in the sense of NAFTA and some of these other things that have attacked unions. But I guess I'm asking this question of what has allowed the attacks on you in this way? What has allowed those attacks? And if you were really allied with the party, is it terror of the other? Or is it that you actually like what these guys are pushing? And I wager, I am strongly making the point that you're just terrified of Republicans. You've lost all your power in this equation, dude. Lorms, 1. Co-op over union, definitely better for people who do the work. Yes, agreed. Agreed. D-Mar and Jamal, come back on the amphetamines. I don't take amphetamines. They don't do anything for me. Jacqueline Thompson, isn't Planned Parenthood like this too, in bed with DP politicians and endorsing the establishment candidate? A lot of these groups do that. Clyde Illusion, I own several businesses. I cannot get half of my workers to work thanks to unions. It hurts my business. Solo activists, tell that to Germany. Yeah, because Germany their labor unions are pretty potent. But their government is set up in a different way. Like their labor unions, yeah, their labor unions are stronger in Germany, and their labor unions work in tandem with they have certain provisions in government and everything else that protects them. Worker co-ops. That's all I'm saying. Stop going back to the 40s. Worker co-ops. It's a new. I'm just saying, it's a new paradigm. It's not. And man, I don't want to shit on labor unions. It's not that labor unions are bad. I don't want to give that impression at all. Those things are vitally important. I think my point is, because they're so vitally important, it behooves them to understand the contours of what seems to be taking place. They are attacking you, but they're attacking you at your weak link. This weak link of, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this, so I don't want to pay into this. And not just that being incentivized by, these guys are trying to get me to vote for somebody I don't believe in and I don't want to vote for. Yeah, just saying. Just saying. What I'm getting at is, should unions push to create or become a governmental organization capable of passing its own legislation, independent of Congress, like the FCC can? So that's a larger conversation. Yeah, you're beyond me on this one, man. You're Mark Panicki. I hadn't thought of this one. I was talking about more in the political context that we have currently. Like, yes, they should organize. Yes, they should work in tandem with the other unions. Yes, they should either start a party or work with somebody else who's trying to start a party. Look, man, I love what Brana is doing in regards to the People's Party thing, like trying to pull all of these parties together in order to have this delegation of sorts, this kind of thing under the political apparatus itself, and to create his own thing. Meaning, unions are not subordinate to what Democrats want. It's not this kind of give everything, get nothing relationship that these guys have. I would be apathetic towards you, and you need to be happy with that. It's not that. This is what we want in regards to policy, and you have these particular guys saying, yeah, we also want this exact same thing. We're on the exact same page. That's different. That's fundamentally different. Now, from a party apparatus standpoint, I think that is extraordinarily potent, because right off the bat, you've drained so much wind out of Democratic sails that they lose the capacity to win. Now, whether or not you gain the capacity to win in one election cycle is less important than the fact that you make it so that they can't win without you. I'm making the point that fear and cowardice is a problem in the way that things are going. And having some level of bravery, saying, we're going to strike out on our own, we're going to do something different, we're going to make something else, gives you some actual shot at getting the objectives that you want to accomplish. In the relationship that you're currently in, you have no capacity to get what you want as labor enacted into law. Neither party wants those things that you want. And ultimately, the Democratic Party tolerates you purely just to allow you to go out and, get votes for them. So, unions are useless if we continue to develop AI and robotics to replace ourselves. So, Jacqueline Thompson, that's the other thing, right? Workers lose power the further on we get. Now, what I mean by this is, if you're talking about the 40s and the 50s, corporations were mostly in state, meaning in country. So it's not this thing where you have these multinational corporations that span the globe and that I can pull somebody out and drop them into another country and all this other stuff. You didn't have that stuff. But as you pass one trade deal after the next, as you get more technologically sophisticated after the next, meaning one worker can do the job of 5, one worker can do the job of 100, and these robots now can do the job of all of the workers that we had prior. The further along you get into that, the more pressure you put on labor. If you're going to bitch at me about $15 an hour, fuck that. I'm not paying you $15 an hour. I'm putting in a robot in. That robot is going to flip burgers. The robot is going to drop French fries. And I'm going to have one worker here to do that task. Now, yes, I will pay that person $15 an hour, but I fired everybody else into the store and created an automated process. Uber drivers No, we're not going to pay those guys more. No, we don't want them to unionize. And yes, thank you for your service, but now that we have robotic cars, I'm going to fire all of you. All taxi cab drivers lose their jobs. You lose power, your workforce, meaning as workers, the further we get into time, the further loss or the further weakened. I'm saying this immensely poorly. It weakens us as workers. It weakens us as workers. The weaker unions get, it weakens us as workers. The more advanced AI gets, it weakens workers. Automation. Now the catch here is those things shouldn't be negatives. If you can find a robot to do that job, yes, good. There's a robot to do that job. The problem here is the way we've arranged ourselves, the way we perceive ourselves in our society. If there's a robot that can drop French fries, good. I don't want a human being dropping French fries. With all the potential and abilities that a human being could possess, I don't want that person dropping French fries. I don't want that person working a job like that. But in our society, we've fucked ourselves in this weird way of saying, yes, I do want that person to work that job in that way. Even if you had a robot to do it, fuck it. That person needs a job, so I want that person doing that alienated labor. And that's ubiquitous throughout our society. I'm making a point that the more those innovations take place, we've been put in this weird thing where we're going against the machinery, even though we can't win that. The machine is always going to work better. I mean, you wouldn't build the machine if the machine wasn't going to do better than human labor. It weakens us year after year after year after year. We get weakened by these things. Labor needs to change to fit for the time frame. And I'm saying these rallies, yes, the rallies are good. I get it. But it's not working, dude. And part of the reason it's not working is because you've affiliated yourselves with somebody who's not on your side. Not on your side. The rise of robotics and the end of capitalism. That's the end of capitalism is. Why do you believe that? Like, I know what people say. It's like the robotics ends capitalism. But you're assuming that the people at the top are going to be these kind of egalitarian, we're going to make it work for everybody and all this other stuff. It doesn't seem to be that way. It seems that these people look at this stuff and say, how can I get more? Bezos got like $100 fucking billion. It's mind-blowing. Anything to do with the left of my views is communist. I'm going to pretend to be the smart, to be smart now. Mark Pinocchi, on our behalf and independent of Congress. I realized neither party will want to create it, but if we made a department that provided workers with all the same functions unions do, they would hopefully be able to pass their own regulations. That's interesting. So one of the things people have brought up is this thing of employee job guarantee, meaning the government will provide a decent job for anybody who wants a decent job. Now, this is awesome because the money that you're putting into this, you're getting that money back. The money is reverberating back to the economy. Imagine, thousands and thousands and thousands of people get jobs, at least making a certain amount. Let's say $15, $16 an hour. Automatically, you've forced all of these other businesses to match that rate, meaning you're not passing laws to do this. Just by virtue of having that particular thing in process, you've forced everybody else to get a higher standard of living. You've also just eviscerated this idea of poverty, because if you want a job, you got a job. That money that you're paying to do that gets put back into the economy, meaning for every dollar you spend, you're getting that dollar back, just from the standpoint of like, think of it as you're dumping a ton of money into the economy itself at the bottom part of the scale. People who didn't have jobs now have jobs, and those people are working. Those people are spending that cash that they're getting, and that cash is going to other people's pockets who are, again, spending that money back into the economy. It's almost like a direct cash infusion into the economy itself. That would be the smartest thing in the world to do if you wanted to attack poverty, if you wanted to drop money into the economy. I'm not going to do it. That would be the thing to do. They can't kill us all. The reason races are stupid, genetic diversity is good for our species, that we're morally. Xander GC, what do we do with those people? What about those taxes? Companies now pay more because they are automated. Coffee places, car companies, fast food will automate eventually, yeah. And those people are going to lose their jobs. Think of all the people who work at like 7-Eleven. what happens when those things, you walk into a 7-Eleven and it automatically registers your card as you walk through the 7-Eleven. And as you walk out, it charges you based on what you picked up and left with. You don't need workers. You don't need workers. Imagine these buildings that for the most part are almost fully automated, where they can just go dark. They don't even need to have an air conditioner or heater, because you can just leave it at the basic temperature, meaning you're even saving money on the you know, the coolant part of the company. This is, I mean, yeah, one thing after the next. These guys are going to try to save money, and they're going to cut workers from that process. So yeah. Cloud illusion, yeah. Robots entering the workplace isn't even about robots, it's about capitalism. Yeah. How can I do this cheaper? How can it, that is the conversation about robots. How can I do it cheaper? It has nothing to do with the individual, has nothing to do with societal impact. How can I do this for cheaper? If that means shipping the job overseas, if that means putting in a robot, how can I do this cheaper? Sorry you lost your job, man. I got money to make. Fuck your life. Lisa Hauserman. Hi, Jeremy. I'm smoking out the window. Just saw you say hello to me. I really like your video that you did last night. It was nice. George Pagad. Capitalism is good. Rampant, unregulated, exploitive, predatory capitalism is the issue. Ultimate is a failure. No, dude. I disagree with you on that one. What's your name? George Pagad. Yeah, I disagree with you on that one. Capitalism is the problem. I mean, you're talking about, you're acting as if you can separate the incentive model of maximize your profit and say, I'm going to put that in the box and I'm going to make sure that doesn't get out the box. It's getting out the box. It's always going to get out the box. You've created and built a system that says, if I can exploit, if I can externalize all of the costs on everybody else, meaning all the costs, whatever I can do to make as much as I can possibly make, that's what I'm going to do. That's the incentive. There's no incentive into the system to not behave in that way. That's kind of my point. I've heard people make this argument that, oh, capitalism, you know, the schoolboy capitalism is not that bad. Well, the schoolboy capitalism leads to the predatory capitalism, leads to the monster capitalism, leads to the Godzilla capitalism, where it's going to devour everything. There's no separating the two. That's my point, George. There's no separate. How do you separate the two? Do you think that this became this way just magically? Like, what do you think made this way, the way it is now? It grew and evolved naturally as the way it grew and evolved. Capitalism, to some degree, is a tool, like any other tool. Human beings get better at using that tool. And in this case, they got better at exploitation, getting more money out of the system, getting more money out of people, paying off Congress. It's the natural development of the system itself. It is immensely foreseeable. It is immensely foreseeable. Now, you can make the argument to me that communism evolved in the way that it evolved, and it was naturally foreseeable for communism to evolve the way it did. Don't know if I fully buy that, but I can see the argument. But I guess this is the same argument here. This is the natural evolution of capitalism. There is no schoolboy capitalism. There's just the incentive structure of, how can I maximize my profit? How can I get more? And then you have that positive effect of, you're getting more money, you're getting more status. We call this successful, getting as much money as I possibly can make and telling everybody else to fuck off. It doesn't matter how I got this money. As long as I got this money, I am successful. Society says so. Society says I have interesting things to say, even if I don't have two brain cells in my head to rub together. That's your incentive structure. That's built into that model of capitalism. So, a lot of people only really use cash. Lisa Hauserman. Jeremy, I'm working on questions for my gig tomorrow. I'm really just able to listen for it right now. M99. And that's if they don't find an efficient use of us. Shiver. I know, right? I know. Soylent Green, yeah. It's like, there's people in this. It's like, don't hit it. There's people in there. Robots will kill capitalism because they will create mass underemployment and consumption, and will collapse. Oh, citing Oxford study on the consequences of automation on the labor market. I see what you mean. Okay, so yeah, if you're saying there's a hellish ride down, yeah, I agree. Then yeah, I agree. I agree. Jacqueline Thompson, I don't think it's built into capitalism. I think it's built into humans. No. I fundamentally disagree with that. Human beings are software. Human beings are software. We're pliable. I mean, ultimately, you can't really talk about a human being or what's built into a human being. Human beings they express their environment. If you put me in this particular environment, yeah, this is the guy you're going to get. You're going to get this capitalistic monster who's, trying to maximize his profit. But what does a human being look like in a completely different society? So in a pre-Columbian society, what does a human being look like, and how does that human being act? In a Japanese samurai society, how does that human being behave? Say for the moment you have a mythical society on Youre, what does that human being act like? I'm making a point to you that the human being is pliable. You can't talk about that human being without talking about the reality and the environment that the human being exists in. It's almost like you can't talk about a human being and avoid it in this way. It's the society itself. Yes, we've generated the society, but there's a feedback loop in the way that human beings express that stuff. We've ended up in this kind of quagmire where it's almost like we've been dominated by our own creation in this sense. At some point, we're either going to wake up or die. Unlike Leala, we won't know how samurai societies behave until Westworld. The Westworld 2. Lorbs 1. The Juice Jamal in Rational Nation. Oh, Rational National will be a great interaction. Yeah, he seems cool. He's calm. He's very calm. Jack Lash. Is it true that only 20% of the United States use the stock market and that the top 10% owns 80% of the stocks? Yeah, it is true. It is true. It's like 83%, something like that. Some ridiculous number. Like when there's like the stock market is going up, it's like, yeah, that only really bothers to like 20% of the population. Or the top 10%. Most people don't care. Most people don't care. I would be helping Jamal with lots of money. I want him to go mainstream. Clyde Illusion. Ah, thank you, Clyde Illusion. I appreciate it. Capitalism didn't exist. They were sharing in hunter-gatherer societies. That was the other part, right? Yeah, Yvonne. The majority of human history is hunter-gatherer societies, not capitalistic societies. I don't know where they get that from. They act like this is the way things are. This is the natural way of being. It's contrived. It's a game space. People just bought into the game space. It's like, huh, I'm not a slave anymore? No, you're not a slave anymore. You can choose your plantation now. Yes! I'm free! I'm free. You're only free in comparison to the last instance of society. It's not freedom. Beijing had enough problems. The Russians are, sorry, the Cardassians are going to invade. John forgot. Right, I love that. I love geek trivia. I love these little geek inside jokes. It's like, yeah, Beijing had their own issues, man. The Russians, fucked with their election. I mean, the Cardassians. They fucked with their elections. That's awesome. I want Jamal to have 1 million viewers. Oh, man, that's terrifying. Jagler Thompson, unlikely ally. Ooh, can't wait. Ed Morley, gift economies. M99, land of the freeish. Ed Morley, wage slavery. Isn't that amazing? People can be in wage slavery, and the limits of their imagination, or the max of their imagination, is what they currently have. They can't see anything else. Can't see anything else. This arrangement is contrived. Look at the repercussions of the way we arrange ourselves. And yet, when you bring up something else, oh, that can never happen. Human beings can't act that way. And they're talking about this purely just from the context that they're in, because they can't see past the context that they're in. Fucking amazing. Altered Carbon is pretty good. Fletcher Daniels, Altered Carbon is fucking amazing. The consciousness thing is mind-blowing. This idea of downloading a digital consciousness. And think of all the questions that raises. Is it real? Is it real? Like, imagine for the moment that all of your brainwaves were digitized. Like, say for instance, like a CD player, like music, and you just digitize it to ones and zeros. You make it digital. And in making it digital, from a recording, from a radio, like if you're using a record player versus recording, you lose some of the stuff. You lose some of the content. Meaning there are parts of you, meaning from a digital recording, or when a digital recording is made, they said, yeah, we don't need all of it. So it's not analog. The analog system, meaning we have all of it. We're playing all of it. Imperfections and all, it's there. There's a difference between a record versus a digital from a CD player. Now, the reason I say this, and the reason that some people love records as opposed to CD players, is kind of the argument that I'm making here, or the question I'm asking here. If you had the capacity to take consciousness and put it in a digital form, in the same way that you lose something from analog, are you losing something in that recording? And is that still you? Oh, I love that question. I fucking love that question. Is it still you? Like, and not just is it still you, do you trust the people who are taking your consciousness in this way? Meaning, is it being tweaked? Is it being altered? Is there technology to tweak and alter it? Because at this point, it's just ones and zeros. You can do whatever you want to it. Is there hacking into other people's consciousness? Oh, fucking love that. I fucking love that. Yeah, Yvonne, it's fucking, yeah, it's a really good show. It's a really good show. How do you remember when to breathe? Jeremy Chase. Yeah, man. I love some of these shows, man. It is still not you. It's a facsimile, George. But how do you know? That's a fascinating point. Because that facsimile will look you in the face and say, you can go fuck yourself, dude. I'm the real, Bob Cobb or whoever. The facsimile thinks it's the person. But how do you know it's a facsimile and not the person? Because understand, they're not talking about this from the standpoint of soul. They're talking about this from the standpoint of we've been able to digitize consciousness. Think about that. Like, if these people if there's something missing from them, you have zombies. The person might have long died, and 1,000 years later, you have a replica of this person. Is the person real? The person believes it's real. Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Like that's an awesome concept. Imagine you as an individual thinking to yourself, well, shit, man, is this me? Is this really me? And how would you know if it's really you? How would you know? And look, maybe you get to the point in society where you don't care, where the hegemonic belief system kind of just carries it on, and people say, well, it looks like that person, he talks like that person, I'm assuming it's that person. It's a fucking amazing show, man. Jamal, do you prefer vinyl or CD? So I like CD. I like the sound quality. I think the sound quality is slightly better on CD, but I know some people don't. Like, particularly like people who are really into music, like guitars and everything else. A lot of them prefer analog. I don't blame them. But I don't play music that way, and I have no ear for. I love music like that. Like, I lose myself in it because it's art. I lose myself in art in general. But I don't have that ear like that where I can be like, that's a C sharp, but that's a B minor and stuff like that. That movie was interesting, having multiple copies, all one to believe that each year Tom Cruise's character forgot the name. I don't know what that one is. You're not. I know Tom Cruise was in Minority Report. I know in Total Recall that was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Altered Carbon and Black Mirror, by the way, does something similar, where it's. Man, that it's a terrifying reality, dude. Like, do you honestly trust corporations and the way corporations are arranged to manage stuff dealing with your consciousness? I don't. I don't at all. I mean, think of government for that matter. Do you honestly trust government to deal with things dealing with your consciousness? So government wants to get information from you. Government pulls your consciousness out to some degree because now they have a law that says they can pull your consciousness out into a virtual world and interrogate that consciousness in brutal ways, because technically it's not really hurting you. It's not really hurting you. It's your consciousness in a virtual environment. It's not really hurting you. Hey, I can create a copy of your consciousness so it's not really you at all. Your consciousness and everything else intact. The thing that I'm interrogating, yes, it came from you. Yes, it is a copy of you. And yes, I'm going to be brutal in the methods that I get information. I'm going to cut its arm off. I'm going to set it on fire. I'm going to make it swallow acid. And I'm going to reload it to make it go happen over and over and over and over again until you tell me what I need to know. Imagine what the Bush administration would have done if they could have pulled people into a virtual environment and tortured them relentlessly. No fear of death. I can torture you to, there's nobody here to protect you. I'm going to do bad things to you. I'm going to drown you. I'm going to burn you. I'm going to put a stake in your chest. I'm going to pull out your eyes. And then I'm going to reinstantiate you to do it again. That is a terrifying reality. That's all I'm saying. That is an immensely terrifying reality. Government is already trying to alter our perception of reality. Hands off my consciousness. George Papag. Yeah, man. We need much more advanced society. Yes. Yes. But the problem is, like, you can see the technologies even now. I don't think we get consciousness right. Like, I think people who are looking into some of the noetic studies, when you get into this idea of what's consciousness, how does consciousness interact with reality, I think those guys get it more right. I think it's more interesting in those cases because I think they have research to back up their perspective of the world. And it's not just dogmatic. It's not just dogmatic. If you ever get to the point of saying we can read thoughts, and not just read thoughts, which to some degree they have. I mean, they have MRI scans that can guess what you're thinking about. If you get to the point where they can put you in a virtual environment, and when you move your arm, they can say, oh, he's trying to move his arm. In which case, they move the arm of the person in a virtual environment. Now, what you're seeing is a virtual environment. Your arm may not have moved at all. They may have just hijacked the signal. And now you have, for most people, where the computer can sync up with the individual in a virtual environment. So no, it may not look perfect. It may not look like this. It may not even, have the texture and everything else. But you've at the very least created a system where when a person moves his arm, moves his leg, moves his body, moves his head, that the computer itself understands what's taking place and is replicating that behavior in a virtual environment while bypassing the signals of the person in the same way you would bypass the signals of a person in a dream state. If you already have the capacity to guess what the person is thinking, then you're inching your way to that point where you can put a person in a digital environment. Now, say the digital environment doesn't look perfect. Fair enough. But say you add another technology in. Say you found the capacity to block certain thoughts, to block certain things that the person may think and do. So the person can immerse themselves further into their avatar. So when they go into this kind of hunting game, well, they feel a little bit of pain from that. Now, their physical body is okay. And ultimately, they know they're in the game. But they feel it a little bit more. So when they're thirsty, their game character is thirsty. They feel thirsty because the computer is replicating the signal back to you. Now, you've chosen to do this. This is what's taking place because you wanted to immerse yourself into the game. When you're in a fighter jet, you want the capacity to feel wind and all this other stuff. The computer understands what it means to feel wind on the face, and so it replicates that and pushes it back to you as a person. Say the world doesn't look perfect, the world doesn't look great. But you've decided to say, I'm going to whitewash a lot of my memories in the short term so I can experience what it's like to grow up in a particular device. Meaning you immerse yourself so wholly into the device itself that you don't even realize that you weren't, that you're not part of the device. You don't realize that the world that you're looking at is kind of blockish and weird and everything else. To you, that world looks perfectly normal because that's the world you grew up in. There's a world here, but you don't even know that this world here exists. Ultimately, the way the world looks to you is the way you believe the world is and you believe reality is. Imagine meeting somebody else in the span of reality space. And that guy says, I think there's something else. And you say, fuck you, man. There's nothing else. This is all there is. Physical matter reality. In this kind of cube, weird looking world. You get hit by a bus. You wake up like, holy shit, that was awesome. That was awesome. I thought I was that blob guy. I mean, fuck, man. I had no idea. I'm trying to get this point across to you with the potential for this. Meaning, it's amazing and it's terrifying. It's both. I mean, I don't want my consciousness to be stuck in a fucking virtual device. And Lord knows, though, I don't trust government and companies to not do certain bad things to human beings once that technology advances. By the same token, what can an advanced society do with that? Imagine the capacity to say, we want our people to be humanistic, so we need to get this across to people, but we can't beat this into people. There's no way to beat this into people. We wish to persist a hegemonic point of view that sees human beings as being more important than anything else. But we realize we can't beat this in, meaning we will always have systems in our society that rebel against some aspect of our society. But we need to keep our society with this hegemonic point of view. How do we do it? I can totally imagine a school system, an education system, that's that has this kind of virtual environment built into it, allowing people to cycle through one life after the next, after the next, after the next. This person is trauma. This person is difficulty. This person has family issues. This person is black. This person is gay. This person is a lesbian. This person likes, you know, is a fuzzy. He likes having sex with other fuzzies. Whatever. Whatever the difficulty is that that person goes through, because ultimately you can't understand the context of anybody else's life. And yeah, empathy gets you to a certain point. But it's a different thing when you're walking through that person's shoes and you understand the traumas of that person's life. And you come out of that thinking to yourself, okay, I have a well-rounded perspective because I've been through all of these multiple lives that allow me to come to this particular focal point of, yes, I want a humanistic perspective because ultimately that's the only way to get to a sustainable world. Yeah. It's fucking awesome potential. That's all. Veracity Media. Nah, I'm in Richmond, Virginia, man. Robert Pouquet Ray. I've heard even if the dream wasn't real, the experience was. Robert Pouquet Ray. Yeah, it is. Do you gain something from it? Yes or no? Yeah. Is this real? Why do you think? It's like we don't even know if the reality that we're in is real. This concept of real is, it's hard to answer. It's hard to put your arms around. Yvonne Lagolas. Mr. 2, I felt like I went to sleep in 2010 and woke up in a nightmare world. Unlikely ally. I always assume those heritage DNA companies are a scam. Do they harvest your DNA? Maybe. I feel like they throw in garbage, take your money, and send you a BS report. It's like, how do you know? It's like you're stuck in this thing of I have to take their word for it. 70s Dave 34. Is consciousness outside of us? That is the question. And I know there's some materialists who say, no, your consciousness is purely in your head. But they don't know that. They don't know that. You believe you have a body. For all intents and purposes, you may just have a consciousness that's projecting the body. You're in a dream state, your consciousness projects your body. If you're out of body, meaning if you're having an OBE, consciousness projects your body. Why would this be different? Like, why would the faculties, in this case, be different? Now, if the person believes that, yeah, your consciousness is purely in your head, then they would say, well, those are just dreams. Those don't really matter. That's more so their religious belief. This is, if you prick the body, yeah, you're going to bleed. Your consciousness is, you know, giving you results. In this case, there's a rule set. Clearly, there's a rule set. But we don't know. I'd argue we don't know. I'd argue we do not know. Our memories are how we identify ourselves, the world, and those around us. It does change regularly, and it's still what we depend on to define our realities. Not just that, man. It's like all your identity in general. Like, you're not the same person who you were when you were 2 years old. You're not going to be the same person you are when you're 90. Body and everything else is going to be different, but you still identify yourself as you. You can go through a traumatic experience. You can change your views politically and everything else, and at the end of the day, you still identify yourself as you. It's almost like the growth is always done through the identity itself, or the identity itself, regardless of how much it fluctuates and changes and everything else. There's some core of it that stays fundamentally you. It's fucking fascinating. Yvonne Lagolis. Consciousness outside. I've had some really strange experiences during meditations. James Lindsay. I am definitely stoned. That's hilarious. Surely we need to smoke a joint before we explore consciousness any further. Joy Paga. This was not the way this was supposed to go, by the way. Talking about fucking unions. How do we end up on consciousness research? It's funny. Stanford research of Stanford, what is it called? Stanford Institute of Research. I think I'm naming it wrong. Pear Labs is another good one that does consciousness research. CIA, when the CIA was going into this thing of remote viewing, fucking fascinating. Near-death research is fascinating. The professor that used to work at the UVA doing past life research, again, fascinating. He published studies on that stuff, like peer-reviewed studies. So, yes, this stuff is fascinating. Yes, we have a soul, but it's made of lots of tiny robots. Daniel Didnt. Yvonne M. Lagolas. But people still feel therapy. That part's gone. I don't understand that one, Yvonne. Consciousness is the ultimate union. 70s Day 34. Bob Romero. Memories remind me of the Big O, a sort of Japanese Batman, only successful in the United States. The Big O's? Fletcher Daniels. Edwards just started looking at base in interesting. Yellow Brick Road. Why do people always assume that consciousness moves outward rather than inward? That's interesting. Yellow Brick Road. That's interesting. There's a woman on YouTube who made that argument that essentially we think this stuff is like consciousness outside of ourselves, as opposed to consciousness being almost like, how did she put it? Like all this stuff goes inward. Like there is no out there. There's only inside. Like the consciousness is this kind of projector and this kind of machine allowing for the individual to have the experience that we misunderstand what it is. And yeah, that stuff is fascinating, man. But you're stuck in this way of it's hard to know. Even if that's true, it's almost like it's projecting a reality that for you, for all intents and purposes, is physical matter reality. It feels hard. This desk is solid. This chair is there. If I get hit with a bat, I'm going to fall the fuck out. There's rules. The rule set makes the shit real. Like you're stuck. Either way, the rule set makes it real. Whether it's a material world or whether you're stuck with this kind of this kind of it's almost like we call it virtual, but virtual underplays what it is in this way. It's not virtual in the way that we're playing this kind of shitty virtual environment thing. It's look, whether it's virtual, whether it's anything else, whether you're a brain in a jar, it doesn't really matter. The experiences themselves make it real. If you learn something from it, if you took something away from it, if it hurt, if it made you happy, if it made you ecstatic, it doesn't really matter. The experience makes it real. What we call real is just, is there somebody else there to observe it? But just because there's not another human being there doesn't necessarily mean there's another consciousness not there. And even still, if you're the only one there and you got something from it, it was real. Yeah, at least that's my take on it. Lorms, if we're talking about consciousness, what is inward and what is outward? So that's a good question. So I take this to mean, is there an objective reality? And in that particular objective reality that we're all sharing, it's almost like we're all avatars within a game space. Is consciousness the thing that projects the body and projects the rule set? Meaning your consciousness is injected into a particular game space. And as it functions in that game space, it's almost like you're an avatar, but there's a piece of you that's associated and attached to that particular avatar. Now, in that case, I think this is the argument where people will make where consciousness is the thing that's doing this. Consciousness is the thing that's projecting itself into the game space and allowing you to interact with other consciousness. Now, that assumes that there's anybody else there with you. You could potentially be the only one there because you're the only one who you can, I can only hear my thoughts. I have to take the other shit for granted. As opposed to the other way of thinking that, well, all of this is just consciousness. That ultimately what you're seeing, what you're viewing, what you're interacting is this kind of consciousness being almost like a video game player for that particular individual. That it's allowing them to interact with this stuff, but it's purely inside the person. It's not external. It's not you're in a game space. It's more so that the consciousness itself is projecting this particular thing for this particular person, almost like a data stream, whereas the consciousness is almost like a computer that's relaying it. That's the way I understand it, but that could be, all this is conjecture anyway, somewhat of a moot point. Yeah, Big Toe. Your goal is, yeah, my Big Toe. Campbell. Tom Campbell. I like Tom Campbell. I like him. He can be dogmatic. He can be extremely dogmatic. But his stuff is coming from these like OBEs and stuff like that. Guy was a NASA physicist, turned into this kind of weird mystic guru, and he comes back with this kind of the theory of everything. And there's one part about his thing that I love. He comes back with this scientific / philosophical explanation of love. Like that the universe is a bias towards love. And it's fucking love the way he puts it. Saying that anything that you want to do is going to require some degree of cooperation. There's nothing that you can do on your own, meaning you're extraordinarily limited in what you can produce, what you can organize. It's purely just left to your own devices. Because of that, the universe in this way has this kind of bias towards, if you want to get anything accomplished, you need to be able to cooperate with somebody else to get it accomplished. Now, Tom Campbell calls this cooperation love. he doesn't make it in this kind of starry-eyed way. He makes this idea of people being able to relate to one another in order to get things accomplished for a higher goal. It's almost like this mechanical definition of love, but making this argument that the universe has a bias towards this, that cells in your body for it to make you required cooperation, like the way the universe comes together, like balls of goo needs to glump together like rock and everything else in order to make a planet. Think of all the systems that it takes in order to make Earth, for Earth to be habitable in the first place. Think of all the things that have to be in you in order to make you operate in the first place. His argument is, yeah, this universe has a bias towards love. Now, he would argue with you on what do you mean by universe in the first place, but at the very least, this kind of interactive environment, don't get it twisted in the sense of a machine. We don't know what that is. We just know that something else projects this, and we don't even know that. But yeah, he would make the argument that the base of the universe is love. It's fascinating to hear the guy make the case. Infinity works in both directions. We are both giants and microscopic at the same time. Unlike reality, Stephen King's first Dark Tower book has this trippy passage towards the end where they talk about how absurd the infinite size, inward small and outwardly large of the universe is. And yeah, it's always this thing where physicists are like, like it's like, what's beyond the Big Bang? There's nothing beyond the Big Bang, but what are we expanding into? Yeah, shut up, dude. Shut up. We don't need to talk about that. We don't need to talk about that. Yeah. All right, guys. I am going to end it. We went over an hour. Yeah, we went way off the reservation. This started off as me wagging finger at unions and a bunch of other people wagging their fingers at unions saying, stand up for your workers. Stand up for your workers. But we've gotten to this weird place with consciousness. Look, I'm not going to repeat it. I'm just going to say unions are important and they're vital. But it's also important that people understand that they're important and they're vital, and that they serve a major, massive function in the society itself, and that they're continuously under attack. Part of that is disassociating yourself from Democrats. Just my advice. I think the advice is sound. I think the advice is right. I'm not going to repeat the entire argument of it, but I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. And by the way, thank you guys for super cash and donations and everything else. It's appreciated. Have a good one, guys. Where is my mouse?